This is Mr. Impact Wrestling himself, Moose, and you're listening to the Irish Whip.
Hookers? Hookers and Coke?
Hookers and Coke, man.
You're the only pro wrestler I know that wants to do this shit in the morning.
Yeti, you're a f***ing moron.
Put it this way, I think Sami Callihan might as well just change his name to Invader
I
Warner.
want to know why. Like, he can dodge any question. Like, I'll tell anyone that. You can tell me but I'm going to ask specific questions.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
WrestlingNewsSource.com. For all the rest of you yahoos who are out there dilly-dillying you little wankers, we're actually receiving real wrestling news.
This is
Bret screwed Bret.
Who are you to doubt El Dandy? Because this guy's a serious professional.
Bret screwed Bret.
Hold two! Arm bar!
Hey, get a nice shot of the brand new Mr. and Mrs. Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
I hate you. I hate you. I hate your hat. I hate your t-shirts. I hate your wristbands. I hate your shoes. I hate your music. I hate the C Nation. I hate everything that you stand for.
Sodas rule.
Yeah, they do.
What's up, TIW Mafia? JP's here, Josh is here, and we got a guest with us today. He's a sports author, wrestling historian, and straight up wrestling author. He's written, I believe, 7 books on pro wrestling and 6 on professional hockey. Greg Oliver. Greg, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me on the show. Are we going to talk about the Bruins too with that accent, man?
It's actually the one sport I don't watch. Josh is up in Montana, so he's the hockey guy.
Yeah, so that isn't it odd to, like, Boston Bruins are one of the greatest hockey organizations in the world, and this guy's straight from Southie and has no clue what the fuck the Boston Bruins are all about.
That's kind of disappointing, but hey, whatever. It's each to their own.
Everything I know about hockey I learned from my Facebook feed.
But don't ask him about.
Oddly enough, I actually grew up with a kid who's now an NHL official. So.
No, well, that's the thing about in Canada, especially. Everybody knows somebody who made it to the NHL. So it's a law of averages.
You've written books on so many topics of pro wrestling. Not your favorite book, but what's your favorite topic?
Well,
other than hockey.
Yeah, no, with the wrestling, I mean, we did, there's all the books in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame series. There's the Canadians, the tag teams, the heels, the heroes and icons, and now the storytellers. To me, I mean, writing about the bad guys is the most fun, for sure, of all the things. And it allowed me to really go explore things, like sit down with Harley Race and tell me about how you were a bad guy and how it was different than, say, Terry Funk. And it was really fascinating from that perspective. I just love listening to these guys, and so whatever project I'm working on, I'm happy to listen in and hopefully get the real interesting scoop and be able to share it with everybody.
I think Harley Race was a bad guy because everyone in pro wrestling was legitimately afraid of him.
And his wife.
Yeah. He was always a good guy to me, though, and I loved talking to him because he was so easy to transcribe afterwards because he talked so slow. And very measured, in his diction.
Isn't that the cool thing about Harley Race is that when he did that, like, he almost did it intentionally enough to pull you in further because he made you wait for the words.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. He built the drama just by pacing himself and not rushing through it like a lot of madmen usually do on interviews.
I would venture to say it's a safe bet that you had an easier time writing about him than your wife did writing about the missing link.
Yeah, you're right. Dewey Robertson, The Missing Link, you're right. My wife wrote it, and he was a character. Basically, I mean, I called him one day. I was doing an article for Slam Wrestling about fathers and sons, and he's, oh, good, I've been praying for an author. Glad you called. And I said, well, I don't have time to do it right now. But my wife, just quit her job, so she's got time, and that was definitely an adventure from there on in. He was an interesting cat. We learned to really like him, and he was a good friend, but he definitely did not have his head screwed on straight.
Now, you just brought up Slam Wrestling. You actually founded that website, right?
Yeah, we've been going since late 1996, early days of the internet. We were lucky that the Sun Media chain, which included, papers in Calgary that had the Bret Hart column, and Ottawa that had a wrestling column, and Toronto had a wrestling column. So we had immediate content that people wanted to read. And so here we are 23 years later and a lot of gray hair, and Slam Wrestling's still going.
That's for a site like that, that is crazy. That's a long time.
And we've done just about everything, including publish a book just on our own stuff, right? So, but it's been a good ride, and it's nice to see some guys go on and do other things too, right? I mean, wrestling's their passion, but it's not their only job, and I'm sure it's the same for you guys. We love this stuff, but you got to earn a real paycheck sometimes.
Right. The bills have to get paid as well. This is a passion. Yeah. Now, with all the books that you've written, have people always cooperated with you, or did you ever get any pushback?
Oh, yeah. There's always guys that, what are you paying me for this or this and that? And sometimes they ask and then just answer the questions anyway. And sometimes they really do want to get paid, and I've never paid for an interview. Now, have I bought guys beers or lunch or something? Right. Sure. But that's a different thing. So like Vader, for example, he wanted money. Okay, well, have a nice day. So that's just the way it is.
Right. I assume like the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame books I've seen, so I assume that they sell.
Oh yeah, they've done well. Yeah.
Is that your 9 to 5? Is that your bread and butter basically?
No, I've never made a full living out of this. What I like to say is that for the longest time I was a stay-at-home dad / writer, and now my son just turned 13, and so now I'm a writer / stay-at-home dad. The hockey books did better than the wrestling in some ways because they sell quicker and faster here in Canada, but like the heels and tag teams, like they've all gone to multiple printings by this point, which is pretty cool.
Now, the one I want to touch on, and I don't want to touch on it yet, I just want to kind of tease it a little. It's something that I've taken some interest in over the years, and I think every wrestling fan has. And you actually wrote in the Benoit book, correct?
Yeah, we did the first Benoit book. It was me and Steve Johnson who did a number of these books with me. Heath McCoy out of Calgary, and Irv Muchnick, the rabble rouser he's out in California. And we all worked together it was basically an instant book. It was easily the fastest book we ever did. He killed them the end of June. We had the copy in by the beginning of August, and it was out by late September.
Really?
That's a ridiculous turnaround for a real publisher. Like if you're self-publishing, fine, you can have it out tomorrow. But for a real publisher to get that out and on the shelves was a real accomplishment on everybody's part.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is like anybody now, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, anybody now can literally write a book.
Yep. You
self-publish, put it out on Amazon, and have it as not a hard copy. You throw the soft copy out there with like the Kindles and stuff. Your books all have the ISBN numbers. Your books they've been on legitimate. Like you're part of ECW Press for most of them, correct?
Yeah, so 13 books. So all were with ECW Press, and then I actually self-published too. As we talk about that, I did a hockey book. So it's not for you, JP, but it's called Duck with the Puck. It's my son was about 6 at the time, and we worked together on a book about his favorite stuffed animal playing hockey.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then we did another one called Santa's Day Job, which again I self-published. Sometimes you just have the need to do it, right? You get an idea, and it's like I don't want to go through the whole publishing process of trying to find somebody to print this. I'm just gonna do it myself.
And that's now who did? Because both of those had some artwork on them, at least on the covers. Who did you partner up with for that?
Yeah, well, that's the neat part. I mean, in the world today, you can hire somebody anywhere.
Okay.
Now, in my case, Annette Ballesteri did my first book, The Duck with the Puck, and she was one of my Slam Wrestling. She was more cartoonist at the time. And then I just found another girl online for the second book, and Catherine Olechik, and she did a wonderful job with Santa's Day Job. So, it's the same thing, right? There's people out there willing to help. You just got to find them and pay them.
Now, you're getting an award in 2020 and it's your second time receiving this award, which I don't think that happens too often, from the Cauliflower Alley Club. I'm talking about the James Melby Historian Award. What does that mean to you?
Well, technically, it's the second one I've gotten on the James Melby Award, but the other one was from the Dan Gable Museum in Waterloo, Iowa, and their Hall of Fame.
Okay.
So Steve Johnson and I were co-recipients of that in 2008, and that's more of a journalism award. Like they've given it to Bill Apter and to George Napolitano, Mike Mooneyham, and those are all amazing names, and I'm thrilled to be honored with them, and especially Jim Melby, who was a friend of mine. But the CAC, the Cauliflower Alley Club, which is essentially the fraternal organization for pro wrestling. There's really no other thing like it. And theirs is more historian-based, so I'm being recognized for that. But to me, it's also, we talked about Slam Wrestling. I mean, on that site, we've done so much historical-wise that I also considered an award for not just me, but also my writers and all the people who've worked with me over the years, whether we've sent somebody to, Superstar Billy Graham's house in Phoenix or we dropped by Reggie Park's house. He's also in Phoenix, and look at him making belts. I mean, these are historical things that we made and that are online. So
that's pretty. Like the Reggie Park's belts. I mean, they make some of the best belts out there.
Yeah, he's been retired a lot lately, but he's still an amazing dude.
Now, what does it mean to you, or what do you think it takes to be considered a wrestling historian? Because it's a term that's thrown around a lot, and I figure someone like you, you're getting awards for it. The Cauliflower Alley Club's recognizing you as a historian. What do you think it takes to be considered a historian?
That's a good question. It's because I'm also part of a hockey historians group called the Society of International Hockey Research, and so you think about that a lot because it's not just collecting stats, right? It's not just who won, who lost, which belts you held. It's also how everything fits together, how this led to that. Maybe it's the real names. It's digging up information nobody else has found before. It's packaging it in a way that's relatable for people, right? If you just post it on a website, nobody sees it. Does it really count? I guess that might be a bit dismissive, but I don't mean it to be. It's just we've worked really hard, and Steve Johnson is a little bit older than me, and he's been a journalist a little bit longer, like about 10 years, so not a lot, but enough that he really inspired me when we worked together on tag teams and heels and heroes and icons and then the storytellers to try harder to get that next interview, to dig up that family member that you don't know where they are, but we're going to make 300 calls to make it happen. It's a lot easier now than it used to be internet-wise because you can find people, but it's still a lot of work for sure.
Right, and it is. It's like I said, we started doing this in 04 and 05, me and Josh, both on different shows at the time. And to find a phone number to get an interview, you had to jump through a million hoops. Now you can just message somebody.
Yep.
And it's that much easier with social media and everything. But, I mean, I think to become a wrestling historian, you should have to name everybody that was in the Rio de Janeiro tournament for the first Intercontinental belt.
Yeah, how about I said I've been drinking with Pat Patterson instead? Is that'll qualify me, right?
That will absolutely qualify you.
But those are the memories you get at these events, right? So when you go to the Cauliflower Alley Club, or you go to Amsterdam, New York, where the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame used to be, or now it's in Wichita Falls, or you go to Waterloo, or you go to even like the Fan Fest, the recent one that was in where was it? North Carolina. But you go to all those different events, and you get time with these guys that are your heroes, or that you worshipped, or that you didn't know much about. But man, sitting down and drinking beer with Jack Briscoe and his wife Jan, like these are memories I'll keep forever.
No, yeah, it's insane when you get to, because we've done I've done a couple where we've gotten tables at a couple of the fan fests, and just to be able to hang out at afterwards with some of these guys and have conversations with them, and it's guys you grew up with. It's crazy that it's that small of a world.
They're normal people, aren't they? But they're not normal. Like it's hard to explain that, for every guy like a Rick Martel, who really does seem grounded, didn't have his kid till after wrestling and had a good job to go back to. Then there's the guys like, your Ken Pateras or your Jake Roberts that just are, not quite all there. To use the term I used earlier with Dewey Robertson.
Now, what type of, like when you do these lists and you kind of rank people, have you had anybody that's come to you and said, hey, why was I this and I should have been that, or why wasn't I before this guy and I should have been?
Yeah, no, there's always guys like that. And wrestling is such a funny business because you're at one time you have to rely on everybody else to make yourself look good, right? You got to have an opponent, you got to have a referee, you got to have the lighting guy, you got to have everybody that makes it all work to make yourself look good. And so you're always self-promoting yourself. And these guys, if they weren't saying, I deserve that, then they probably don't belong in the business. Because you need an ego. But it's so bizarre compared to, the hockey players. You don't hear them complaining about their ranking in the top 100 of all time. But in pro wrestling, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe you did this. But the point is that I'm a historian. I've gone through, and when we established that Jim Londos was the greatest babyface of all time in our Heroes and Icons book, a lot of people always go, Jim Londos? Well, he was the Babe Ruth of the day, right, back in the 1930s. And there's no equivalent today. And the amount of publicity he got, the worship he got, there never will be another one. And that's just the nature of the business and the world and how it's changed. So there's always going to be people a little bit upset about that. One of my favorite stories, though, was Gene Kiniski. He's number 6 in my all-time Canadians list. And I told him he's number 6, and he started hemming and hawing and getting a little bit upset on the phone. And I said, Gene, let me tell you who's ahead of you. And I go, Whipper Billy Watson, Yvon Robert, Killer Kowalski, Mad Dog Vachon, and Earl McCready. And he just goes, I'm okay with that. So, you got to be able to rein in your ego sometimes too, I guess, is a good way to put it.
I'm looking on your Wikipedia.
Yep.
And
what a lovely picture.
That's an author picture though. That's one of those you put in the back of the book.
Did you say Wikipedia or Wikipedia?
Wikipedia. I wanted to start a Boston-based one and call it Wickedpedia at one point, and I just never did it.
Wicked Pissopedia.
But Bret Hart was apparently upset that he was behind Skyler Lowe.
Yeah, and that. I don't have a problem with him being upset about that, and that happened. But the problem is, it happened publicly. So the short version of it was that he was inducting his father into the Hall of Fame in Waterloo, Iowa, based on his amateur credentials, this and that. And he used his time on the platform, which I didn't even have a time on the platform. Mine was in the afternoon when Steve Johnson and I were honored. We didn't get a spot at the banquet. And then Bret used that time to go off on me about not being worthy. So in the end, he said, you leave or I leave. And I just waved and he stormed off. And so, as I said, you need to have an ego in the business. I understand that. But you also need to be able to be a decent person. And he had plenty of chances to talk to me in person if he's upset about whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, Bret, I won't say anything negative. I don't know Bret Hart, but I've heard stories on his ego.
Yeah, and that's fine.
And I can say
it's a business that needs ego.
Right. If you don't think you're the best in the room, you shouldn't be in the room.
Yeah, exactly. You don't think you deserve that chance to main event or to do whatever. Yeah, why are you there?
Now, what can I ask? Because I think I know the answer. What had you put Skyler Lowe ahead of him?
Oh, it was Skyler Lowe and Little Beaver. We're 8 and 8.5. So
exactly
we paired them together.
Thinking.
Like that's a bit of a gimmick. I have no problem with that. But they were world famous pioneering midget wrestlers, both from Quebec, which is amazing in and of itself. They wrestled in front of the Queen. They did so many things that were groundbreaking.
Yes.
That to me means a lot more than a guy in a multimedia world. Which Bret, it's a time and a place. What he got done in the 90s is different than what the guys did in the 50s and 60s.
And that's exactly what I figured was Skyler Lowe historically made more impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's now. I do want to touch on the Chris Benoit thing because I know I've listened to guys talk and Chris Nowinski said publicly, very publicly at one point He was told if he went after Chris Benoit's brain or if he went public with any of it that he wasn't going to be employed anymore, and he wasn't employed anymore. He chose to pursue that, obviously, with the CTE and the post-concussion syndrome and that type of thing. Did you get pushback from anybody on the Benoit thing?
Well, it goes back to your earlier question about, guys refusing to be interviewed. So, during that, it was such a delicate subject that there were a number of people that said, no, I'd rather not talk. And that's fine. I respect that. Just, again, be professional about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can remember, like, Scott Norton, for example. Then again, you hear all these different things about the business, and we hear rumors and they get spread so quickly. So a good example is Trevor Murdoch, who was in the WWE at the time. And I saw him at an event in Iowa, and I asked, I'm understand you guys aren't allowed to talk about Benoit. And he said, no, that's not true. So we sat down and we talked about Benoit, and he, the delicateness of the subject and the way we talked about it led to him reaching out to me afterwards when Lance Cade died. And he said, well, I really want to talk about Lance. Will you talk to me about it? So there's, I guess that's the way you build on relationships through the years. And even a delicate subject can be worthwhile in the end, right?
And because that's something that did change not just pro wrestling, but the NFL as well. In the way they handle things. I think all the CTE stuff that the NFL is doing, that the WWE is doing, the WWE clearly, but the NFL, I think, all started there as well.
I think that's the question that I want to ask is really like, when you were doing the research on Benoit and you were looking at all this information, like how difficult was it for you to not only like dive into that story, but also be able to write about it, like between the mental health and the CTE and the frontal lobe, and even relating to that to enforcers in the NHL. Like, is it hard to write a story like that? I mean, I can't imagine being in your shoes, but I mean, what is the process? I mean, there's a writing process. Like, what was your process for that Benoit portion?
The best thing to say is that in the end, you're a professional, right? And you have to step back. But there are things you can't deny, right? So part of the book is personal letters that Chris Benoit wrote to me, emails. There's not a lot, but there's a few, and he talks about, I'd sent him a note after Eddie Guerrero died. We knew each other. I probably did his first ever extended interview when he was in WCW, because he'd only just arrived, and I remember bugging Alan Sharp, who was their PR guy, about it. How much I really wanted to talk to this guy who'd been in Mexico and been in Germany and been in Japan. So I got to talk to him, which was awesome. So we kept in touch. And like I said, we weren't close friends, but, when Eddie Guerrero died, I sent a note. And he wrote back appreciative and said that his wife, Nancy, had bought him a journal to be able to keep track of his thoughts. And he was having real trouble dealing with Eddie's loss and his own feelings about it all. So, I mean, I have all this stuff, which is, I mean, not to be facetious or anything, but it was gold, right? It was really good stuff, and I knew that. So that was one of the centerpieces of the whole book. And I was able to string a couple other stories to, where'd I go? The Atlanta Journal and Journal-Constitution, and the Globe and Mail in Toronto. So all these different places I was able to do different pieces for and rely on some of that stuff I did, plus the book. So it was very, it's delicate for sure. There's no other word for it, right? You got to be careful how you write stuff, but you do have to be professional and step back and write in an impartial tone.
But was it?
Is it surprising? I guess my thing, JP, is it like surprising to know, because we're sitting here, we're talking about Benoit. I mean, when they got done, I mean, his brain, the amount of damage that was done, I guess, and you probably can't answer this question, or I mean, when you're writing that book, did it ever cross your mind, like, where does the accountability lie for this? Is it the organization? Is it the person? or is it the people that are watching this?
Good question. The thing about writing the book, though, was that it came out right away. We didn't have all that stuff, right? Because, I mean, if your publishing deadline's early August, not all that stuff came out. Irv Muchnick continued the dialogue quite a bit in his Nancy and Chris book that came out like a full year later. So he explored a lot more of that stuff. But as a wrestling fan, yeah, I know you take a little bit of that responsibility in that, you know, we want these guys to perform. And the bar had just kept getting higher and higher to the point that the concussions were just part of it that we accepted. And that shouldn't be the way it is. And football is going through a lot of that now, as you mentioned. And I hope they find a way around it. But, you know, there may not be professional football as we know it in another 10 years.
Right. It's just the way that sport's changed.
Is it the same kind of like when we talk about the enforcer position in hockey? I mean, is that
absolutely
relevant? I mean, for me, I love the enforcer. Like I grew up loving the enforcer. Like when those guys stepped in the ice, you knew that they were going to go find Wayne Gretzky and try to knock him on his ass.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I think that, but there were guys there to protect Gretzky.
The enforcers.
Yeah, but they didn't go target. It wasn't headhunting in that sense, right? It wasn't them going out there to try to target some specific guy. But there is an element of that in hockey for sure. And wrestling's similar. But in the end, these guys are independent contractors, the wrestlers, right? So they had nobody looking out for their interest. When I talk to an 80-year-old wrestler, his brain's pretty well scrambled, right? Or he's not going to be great. When I talk to an 80-year-old hockey player, he's had a chance. He's had somebody looking out for him his whole career, right? He's had a manager, he's had a coach, he's had a trainer, he's had teammates, all these people that were in his best interest, and a union, more importantly. So that's probably the fundamental difference between the two of them. And I hope that sort of makes sense, is that, you know, wrestling...
No, it absolutely makes sense, because that's the contention that JP and I have had for over 15 years, is that it's still, there's no, everything that you get in an organization like the NHL, you do not get in professional wrestling.
No,
you're right. You get fame, I guess. But that's the main thing they want, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, no.
Why do we watch it? I wonder sometimes.
Yeah, I wonder every time I watch it lately. Now, you got a couple of projects coming up too. Yeah. No, it's always, you always got to work on the next project. So the latest book is called The Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, The Storytellers. And Steve Johnson and I go from like the 1890s right up till, you know, talking to Kenny Omega about his ideas of storytelling and what he's trying to do in the wrestling ring. So it was quite fascinating. I mean, we do the bears and the midgets. We go into the hardcore death style matches, like all kinds of different aspects. And again, it's called the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, The Storytellers, from the Terrible Turk to Twitter. So it was a lot of fun to work on. That's the latest book that's on shelves and would look really good under your Christmas tree. Yeah, that's my style of wrestling. Like, I love watching the stories. I love watching the story being told in the ring. So that's definitely one I am going to grab.
But we also talk about some of those behind-the-scenes things, too, or how, you know, the whole throwing a belt off a bridge came about. You know, so there's different aspects of it, too. Like, you look at the Ultimate Deletion. So those are more recent examples, right? So it's a great book. But the other one that has wrestling fans, certainly in the Northeast, in the United States, excited is I've been working with John Arezzi on his memoir. And John Arezzi, for those who don't know, was a pioneering radio guy doing a wrestling radio show in the early 90s when nobody else was really doing that. Right. And that led him into promoting this and that. But I wouldn't have taken the job probably if it was just about writing about that, because John also, you know, left everything behind and went and worked for the New York Mets for a year, which was fascinating in itself, just learning about the minor league baseball. But then he went into a bar and saw a fascinating singer, and he says, I love this singer. I got to do something with her. And it was Patty Loveless. So he helped manage her early career before she became a country music superstar. And they did country music he's still in country music, so 20 years later. Wow. So I get to hear stories about Kelsey Ballerini and Sarah Darling. the hard part is trying to figure out how this is going to work, right? Does every wrestling fan know all these, country music stars, or do every country music fan that reads this want to know about the wrestlers? I haven't figured out that part yet, but that's coming up shortly.
You know what? Like, I don't know country music at all. I know the names. I know like Taylor Swift, and I know she's named in there. I'm just looking right off of all
I
of
didn't
the
even know you knew the word
books.ca.
country, JP.
But I know the first half of it. I do a podcast with one. But it's
such an asshole.
But it's like, I know Taylor Swift, and that's, I want to see how this intertwines, because you're talking 3 completely different industries with pro wrestling, country music, and I'm from Boston, so I can't say the name of that team in New York. I can't say the name of either team in New York, but, there was something in '86 that happened, and
well, we may have to say it more. I don't know if you guys saw it. There's a tweet that Tommy Dreamer sent out today to The Rock saying, the Mets are now for sale. Let's buy them. So
yeah,
that'd
be awesome, actually.
What? I did not see that.
No, it was meant as a joke, I think, but The Rock's the only guy we know that has enough money to even think about that, right? So
The Rock absolutely has that kind of money.
Yep, yeah, that'd be neat. So.
Are you an all-around sports guy, or are you strictly pro wrestling and hockey for the most part?
I've done lots of different things over the years. You never know where things are going to take you, right? My brother's a very accomplished basketball guy, so I've been doing a little bit of basketball stuff with him lately. It's wherever the world takes you, right? I mean, I had an offer once to do a curling book, but I turned it down. I just couldn't see myself doing it. So you just don't know what's going to be around the corner. I actually have we talked about self-publishing. So there's a book I've done on a guy named Billy Van. So I'm waiting for the feedback from his family before we self-publish it. But he was an actor. He was on Sonny and Cher. He did all kinds of stuff, but he's best known for The Hilarious House of Frightenstein, which was a kid's horror show of the weirdest thing to say in the world, but that's exactly what it was. And so I wrote his biography. And so that took me in a whole different world, dealing with actors and agents and people behind the scenes of that. And so I loved it. I loved the challenge of learning new things. So I that's partly why the John Arezzi book appealed to me, is I'm going to learn new things.
Now I'm looking at your website now, and you have some stuff for sale other than the books. Of course, the books are
the
there.
iron-ons. Yeah.
Josh, he's got iron-ons from the 70s.
No.
Yep.
For $6. Well, $6.
Like
$5.99.
The caveat to that is you've got to find a T-shirt printer, which I mean is not that hard to do anymore. So somebody who's going to have a big, flat device that, like a heavy T-shirt press, that'll make sure it stays on there.
Right.
But I mean, I've had mine. I've got a Dick Murdoch and a Wahoo McDaniel one that I wear often, and I've had them for 5 or 6 years now. But yeah, these are vintage 1970s iron-ons. The short story is that the AWA made them up. These ones were all in they were in Al Tomko's basement, who was the AWA promoter in Winnipeg.
Wow.
And when he moved to go to Vancouver to promote there, he left his stuff behind with a guy named Terry Malchulak. And so Terry, has given me some to sell, and we've done okay with them. And they're fascinating. And you get to then you take the iron-on, you get to choose. I want to have a Ric Flair, iron-on a hoodie. Well, you can do that then if you find a place that'll do it for you.
So these are legitimately from the 1970s.
Yeah.
No, good glue then. Good glue.
I mean it's old technology, really.
Yeah.
It still works, right? Whereas you buy a fridge now and it's done in 3 years, right?
Exactly. That stuff was built to stay. I mean,
I'm looking through some of these, and I mean the Heenan family, Nick Bockwinkel, Briscoe, Flair, Murdoch, Terry Funk.
Wow, that's
Dory,
awesome.
Jumping Jim Bronsell.
You're a Patriots guy. You should get a Bill Francis one with his name spelled wrong. I haven't sold one of those for some reason. So.
Really?
Yeah. No, it's odd. They did a couple of spelling mistakes. I mean, Dick Murdoch's name is spelled wrong. It's Bill Francis, like the woman's name, Francis.
I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, but I haven't sold any of those. Imagine
that. I'm looking at that one now. That's wow.
Yeah, imagine walking in the Gillette Stadium with that. Come on.
That's insane. But these are literally, like I talk about you being a historian, these are a piece of history. If I bought, and I'm probably going to buy a couple, I don't know if I would bother putting them on a shirt.
I know.
Well, they don't, but see, they're reversed, right? They don't look that good otherwise.
That's all right. I know what they are.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Just as a collector of stuff, I would know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they're really unique. I'll say that, and I've enjoyed, promoting them. But what I did find was going to those fan fests and stuff that, bringing T-shirts is a hassle. So we're doing it this way and just trying to unload the iron on itself is a lot easier.
Now, have you set those up at tables?
Yeah, but again, they're a little big and bulky, and then people ask, well, can I get this one? Then you got to look through them all, and you got to find them an envelope. You got to to do those things in person at that moment is a bit of a hassle. But I have done it, and I will do it again. I was supposed to do one in New Jersey recently, but I didn't end up going. Life interferes sometimes.
Absolutely.
That's the reality.
You can get all of your books, including an autograph book by you and Quinn for What Duck with the Buck.
Yeah. Yeah, he's still, he's 13 now. He's a little too cool for it all, but it's still pretty awesome that we did that together. So.
Yeah, you know what? In 20 years, when he's 33, he'll appreciate that.
Yeah, well, we definitely appreciate it.
He'll be able to say, hey, I wrote a book, I'm an author. And no matter what, you always wrote a book, so you're always an author.
Yep.
I don't think you lose that,
Yeah, and everything else that came with it, the little bit of celebrity he got, we were on TV and stuff like that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
He was the cool kid for a few minutes.
For a few minutes, yeah. That's something I never was in school. I was watching wrestling, know.
Yeah, trust me, I understand. It wasn't cool, but it was, you had to almost hide it back in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Until the Attitude Era.
Hulkamania ran wild, so that's how I got involved and got interested in wrestling, and it was all through the schoolyard, but it was not a fad that really lasted, right? And so, it wasn't too long thereafter when nobody was ever talking about it anymore, but yet here I was doing a wrestling newsletter, here I was, doing all this other stuff, and I couldn't let it go. And that leads us up to today, and 7 books and another wrestling book in the works.
He should write a book on Wrestle Fan Fest 2007.
Which one was that one? Was I at that one? I can't remember.
It was the show. So we were actually the guy who was running this was this guy Chris Salisbury.
Was that the one in San Francisco?
Yes.
No. Oh, okay. Well, I had guys there then. Yeah. So.
And did they get paid?
Oh no, I had writers there and stuff that went down for the moment.
Yeah,
and all that.
He had come to both of our shows at the time, and had us helping to promote him, and was using our names at the time on people, and then so when he disappeared really quick after that.
It's a crazy business.
That was the one with the Ring of Honor at the Cow Palace, and
yeah, I'm glad I wasn't there.
Yeah, me too. I was glad I was on the East Coast for that one.
I literally showed up at the airport to get my ticket, and there was no ticket there.
Well,
it was a good thing.
Yeah, you didn't have to go then. You didn't. But then again, my guys have great stories about sitting with, Scott Norton is another name I mentioned. Sitting in the bar and hearing him vent. It's a crazy business.
Yeah, it's insane. And now, how far back as a historian? I know you brought up the 1890s earlier, which is kind of insane. How far back have you actually tracked wrestling?
Well, Steve did a lot of that, but the 1890s, wrestling was worked then. Everybody who talks about, the idea that, Frank Gotch was legit is nuts. It was not the case at all. They had different ways of working for sure, and it may not have been as evident as it is, say, today, trying to watch Marco Stunt or something. But It's just different, right? And that's what pro wrestling's about.
Right. So this is my take on it, is like I've always loved pro wrestling, and I didn't always as a kid. I didn't understand it was a work, but I do now. And, you know, back then I loved watching Hulk Hogan, and I loved watching Ricky Steamboat and Piper, and I believed that it was real, and I bought into it. Now I understand, and I love watching Marco Stunt, Orange Cassidy, and those guys. It's complete. It's different, but it's entertaining, and it's pro wrestling.
No, I'll agree. I understand there needs to be a fan base for that. It's the same, you know, go to the hockey games. Some guys love the goalies. Some guys love the, you know, the fighters. Some guys love the goal scorers, you know, the showboats, whatever it is, right? So you need the variety, and wrestling provides that in spades for sure.
If hockey was all fights, I would love it.
Wow. Then we're back to the concussion issue, aren't we?
Right. There was a time in the 1980s.
That's like saying if the Patriots actually didn't cheat, I'd watch football.
Oh, get out of here. Oh. There was a time in the 80s with the NHL in Boston when they were playing. They played at the old Boston Garden, of course. Ray Flynn was the mayor. And he was actually instructing cops to go on the ice to break up fights and arrest them. I don't know that anyone ever got arrested, but he was literally like giving those orders to the police to break up the fights on the ice.
I believe it. It was a tougher game in the 80s, and so our book "Don't Call Me Goon," where we talked to a bunch of them, is a lot more about that. Is interviewing the guys who fought a lot and what it was like. And we didn't really explore all the concussions. It was a little bit more of a love-in. In retrospect, I probably wish we had gone into a lot more of that, the effect on the bodies and this and that. But, you know, it is what it is. It came out when it came out.
Now, Greg, where can people find you on social media and stuff if you want it to be found?
If I wanted to be found. That's a good point. So oliverbooks.ca is my personal website. Slam Wrestling is, of course, the website. You can just Google it. It's probably the easiest. It's a bit complicated to describe. I wish we had slamwrestling.com, but we don't. But we're part of the Post Media chain, which is the largest newspaper chain in Canada. So it's pretty easy to find, and Google loves us. But then I'm on Twitter, Greg Mep, M as in Meredith, my wife, E and P. Greg Mep. Is both my simpatico, and you can find me on Facebook as well. But yeah, I do like interacting, and I miss it. Like when I mentioned Slam Wrestling's been around for 23 years, we used to get tons of email. But now you don't always see that, right? An article may go viral, but you don't get the feedback.
Right.
So I try to make a point of writing to somebody if I really like what they did. It's just a small little thing I've committed myself to.
I feel like back then, like we use WrestlingNewsSource.com a lot. Like they post all of our stuff and everything. So we have a decent partnership with them, but they're sort of newer. They didn't come out until they're maybe 10 years old, if that. I feel like back when Slam started, it was more, there was opinion-based stuff, but I feel like you guys had to dig a little more because kayfabe was sort of still a thing. And but you guys had to dig and get your own sources and kind of make friendly with some of these guys, where I don't think the newer sites now get that opportunity.
No, they don't. And yeah, we certainly fought for that respectability. Like a good example, the WWE had an office in Toronto. So that meant that there was often talent coming through town, but they would often try to control what you're writing. Well, no, I work for a major newspaper chain, and you're not controlling what I write. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
Whereas a lot of other guys never went through that. I mean, so we also published a book about Slam Wrestling that ECW Press published, just called Slam Wrestling. And in there, we explore a lot of the WWE's decision to eliminate any discussion with internet sites at all, which is just crazy. So that was their plan, was that, you know, we're not going to talk to internet sites. We have our own website. Okay, they obviously didn't see where the world was going. But, you know, we were part of the guys that fought for that and that made it change. Same thing at WrestleMania. I can remember, WrestleMania 2000. I'm filing to the entire newspaper chain of the Sun Media. And the WWF hadn't bothered to turn on the Wi-Fi in the press box because it cost more money. This is WrestleMania. So we ended up finding somebody who worked at the Arrowhead Pond. I put my story on a floppy disk, and we went down to their office, and they booted up their computer where they had internet, and I filed from there to an entire newspaper chain across Canada. So that's how things have changed now. I mean, the WWF, the WWE does a wonderful job with the media at WrestleMania. My guys basically fight to go every year. So they've learned, and we all learned. But, I mean, we were definitely part of that fight.
And that's, I just feel like that's the difference. And don't get me wrong, like, I love the stuff that's out there now, but, like, you guys fighting for that. Like, I used to love watching, like, I would go on to the news groups before the websites were out, and then when the websites came out, it was basically, like, you guys. And, you know, Meltzer probably always had something with One Wrestling and stuff like that, but, I mean, Slam Wrestling has been quite a name for years, so
thank you. Yeah,
that's not really
I think
easy
that's
to
quite
do.
True. Yeah, it's fun and it's entertaining, and you never know what you're going to get. There's just so much content now, right? There's so much wrestling.
I want to
awesome
ask
right now.
I want to ask Greg just like a quick question, especially with like this newer generation, and we keep talking about professionalism. Like, I don't know if you know, like a lot of these younger kids use what's called Patreon, where it's a subscription service to go on there and they sell items and things like that. I mean, is that something you're familiar with? And is that, I mean...
So you mean the wrestlers selling stuff, or?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. I understand. Everybody's got to make a buck out of it. It's the same thing. Like when I go to an indie show and I set up a table selling my books, I know I'm taking maybe a couple of bucks away from somebody else, right? Somebody who needs those T-shirt sales to put food on the table or whatever. But it's like I've got to make a living too, and this is my market, right? So
that's
Patreon is a little bit more obvious with it all. So I think that's the one thing I guess I like about it, is that they're very upfront in saying, well, here, I need the money, send me the money here, right? It's not something underhanded or anything, right?
No, and they get some kind of service for their whatever they're paying, you know.
Yeah, a bonus. So even John Arezzi, who I mentioned I'm doing the book with, so he's got a Patreon page for people to go listen to his entire old archive.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty neat. You get to listen to these interviews like Classy Freddie Blassie from, you know, well, he had early ones that he did with Freddie Blassie, but, you know, guys like Ricky Steamboat when he left the NWA. You know, when he left WWF and went to the NWA and then left the NWA and was a free agent, John got his first interview. So, you know, there's some really cool stuff there archived. But John had the foresight to keep everything. And I don't see this happening in 20 years, right? Where are the archives going to be for some of this stuff?
Right. Everything's going to be YouTube, and we're guilty of that too. Like, I have most of ours, but if I upgrade my computer, I'm going to lose everything.
Well, the amount of time that Steve Johnson and I have spent poring over old letters in the Jack Pfeffer collection at the University of Notre Dame goes back to the question about, you know, what makes a historian. Well, I mean, time and commitment is certainly a big part of it. And, you know, did everything pan out when we were there? No, but I spent 4 days there and he spent 5. It was very important for us to do that and mine it for as much as we could.
That's it. And I mean, that's the answer to what it takes to be a wrestling historian, I guess, is time and studying and commitment.
Yeah. It's certainly not for the payoff.
I got one wrestling historian question before I let you go.
Okay.
Was Abe Lincoln a worker? Oh,
that's a good question. First off, there's a great mural of him at the Waterloo Trago Thez Hall of Fame. So he's celebrated there. I think those were more legitimate back then.
Okay.
To be quite honest, I mean they're more like bare knuckle fights. If you look at the way it was all set up and arranged and this and that, I think that would be closer to what he was doing. But he's a politician, so naturally he's a worker anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, they all are. But that's been honestly like a question that I've always wondered. Because
no,
you
I mean,
always
when
hear the
people
story
say
that
he
he
was
was
a-
a wrestler.
Yeah, when people say he was a wrestler, it's not quite what we envision at all. It
Yeah.
means that, he did, compete locally or whatever in strongman competitions, essentially, or, who's the best at this. And that's always gone on and always will. I mean, there's pictures of guys wrestling in hieroglyphics in Egypt, right? I mean, wrestling will always be around in some form.
Yeah, and it's... I'm glad it's at where it's at, but I miss where it was.
That's a
There's
nice
no
way to put
Roddy
it.
Piper. There's no Roddy Piper right now.
There's no Rock. Like, there's nobody that
Right.
transcends.
I think the closest is Jericho.
Yeah.
I think he put himself, with the stuff he's doing now and staying relevant, I think he's put himself as one of the greatest of all time. But what's after him? Is it Omega?
But Kenny Omega's a good dude, but yeah, I don't think he has that appeal that Jericho did. And Jericho's been brilliant about remaking himself. He deserves a lot of credit for that.
It's crazy how he stayed relevant. But, Greg, listen, we've taken up an hour of your time.
Well, it flew by, guys, so that's a good
It's gone by quick. Guys, check out oliverbooks.ca. All of his books are there. The T-shirt, the iron-ons are there. I'm going to be ordering a couple once I get paid this week, absolutely. Because like I said, I'm not putting them on shirts. I just want to have those.
Okay, well, but they make great gifts, too.
Something I can say I had. And, but check out his books. When the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame Storytellers, that's out now, correct?
Yep, yeah, that came out in August.
Now, where can they get these books? Is that strictly on your site, or is this like in Amazon?
Well, what a lot of people don't know, and this is me speaking on behalf of all authors, is if there's a book you want, go into your local bookstore. Help support your local bookstore. And you can go in there and ask for it, and they'll order it. And then chances are they might order a second copy to put on their shelves, which only helps an author.
Right.
So don't be scared to go into your bookstore and ask for a book. You don't necessarily have to order through Amazon or wherever. But, yeah, my books are available in many different places. It was certainly fun, heading out wherever you are in the world and seeing them on your shelves. It's quite quite an accomplishment. It's a nice – I got to have an ego in this business too, right?
I typically say go down and order two, but buy one.
Yeah, something like that works, yeah.
Within the next – I will be in bookstores within the next – coming up on Christmas holidays, so I'll absolutely be in bookstores. And I'm going to look and I'm going to ask.
I think it's funny that you're going into bookstores even because you can't read. Like, I think it's funny that you go into bookstores.
They have pictures in some of them.
Well, you got some great pictures in the book. Let me tell you, the Storytellers one has some awesome pictures.
If that's there, I'm going to take a picture and then I'm going to tweet it to you.
There you go. That's another way. You share it, right? We just got a tweet today from Poland, a guy who bought our Don't Call Me Goon book and the Goaltenders Union. So
that's awesome.
You don't know where stuff is ending up. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's... So you will see... Hopefully you'll see a tweet from me because that means it's there. And if it's not there, I'm asking for it.
Okay.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate your time.
Thank you both for having me on the show, guys.
Anytime.